Hello, it's Flea here once again. A little while ago, I think it was a couple of months ago, I pulled out a stack of books, started speaking about the books that I had read recently, and I really like doing it. I like talking about books, I love them. So here I am with my cup of coffee this morning. It's a lovely cup that my niece gave me for Christmas, my niece Lily, and it's a really beautiful cup. It's second only to the cup that my daughter Clara gave me. So when the Clara one is in the washing machine, I always use this one. Well, I'm gonna go, this is a stack of the last books that I've read. I've read a couple of other things since, but I don't know what's going on with them. Firstly, I read this book, There, by Tommy Orange, which is a contemporary novel and a contemporary writer, and this follow-up to it, Wandering Stars, and they're both, it's kind of one big book. To me, it's one big book. These books are about Native American culture, going back many generations to Indians getting massacred by the United States Armed Forces, and all the way up to, it's sort of a generational, all the way up to Native American community living in Oakland, California, now. And it's super heartbreaking and sad and, full of yearning and people dealing with, trauma down through the years and trying to understand their identity, trying to understand their history, trying to understand, to know themselves. And what really struck me about it was the people in the book, the characters in the book that managed to know themselves were so powerful. And self-knowledge is everything. And I think it's a really important part of history for us all to study. And actually right now I'm in the middle of reading another book. I'm reading Larry McMurtry's book on Crazy Horse, which I really like. But these books, at first I was reading it and I was kind of like, God, did he just kind of like throw this together? Because it jumps around all over the place and it's wild. And then I started like feeling the rhythm of his writing and the way that he did it. And the stories are incredible. The characters are wild, dealing with problems, contemporary and historical, that are really significant and shape all of us. And I think it's important for us to be connected to one another. And these are great books. So I say read them. The book that I read after that one is not a new book. Luke, it's not a new book. It's an old book. It's The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I think that I'm actually the first one to ever talk about this book. I don't know if you guys have probably never heard of it. I don't think anyone's ever heard of it. It's a small little book. It never did well. Surely I jest. This book, it's a classic, and I had never read it. And I saw it sitting on a bookshelf, and I was like, now's the time. And, it's a story. It's funny that they call it the Jazz Age, because it's set in the 20s in Long Island, New York, and they say it's the Jazz Age. It's not the Jazz Age to me. I think of the Jazz Age as the 40 when Charlie Parker starts throwing down, but what do I know? It's a story about, for me, it's a story about this guy, Gatsby, and this guy who befriends him, who's kind of like a working class guy who gets kind of thrown into this real highfalutin, rich party scene in the summer in these mansions by the water in Long Island. And it's about this guy who's called Gatsby, who's in love with this woman who's married to someone else, and he thinks he really loves her, and his life is he does everything to try to bring her back. He'd had a romance with her years before. And it gets involved in the whole society and the mores of the time and the way that they were. And it's the guy, like F. Scott Fitzgerald is an amazing fucking writer. Word after word, paragraph after paragraph, the descriptions, the way that you feel the characters and who they are is so beautiful. And It's really fun to read. I was enthralled the entire time. The only thing that I knew about this book was when I watched The Wire. And in The Wire, the character D'Angelo, when he's in prison, spoiler alert, before he gets killed by a minion of Stringer Bell's, he's in a book club and he reads The Great Gatsby. And he gives a review on it where he says that Gatsby is really frontin', is what he says. And that's all I knew. And that was always kind of in my head. And now that I read the book, I really agree, because Gatsby's like professing this love the whole time, but it's really not love. It's really a desperate need to fill something in himself that no one can fill. And and that's really what the book is about. It was what it made me think about, is through all the trappings of life and all the distractions, like, what is love? What is it? Is your love real? It's like this is a lifelong journey and a lifelong seek for love. Yeah. The next book I read was by one of my favorite writers of all time. If not my favorite, but she's way up there at the tippy top of my Mount Rushmore. And since I've been a little boy, I learned how to read. I read book after book after book. I never stop. Toni Morrison is one who, I've read most all of her books, but I've never read this one. It's her first book. I think it's her first book. It's a story about a little girl. Her name is Pecola. What?
The title.
The Bluest Eye. I said it. Oh, it's called The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. And it's about this little girl. She's a black girl, and she has a doll that has blue eyes, and she kind of dreams that she could have blue eyes, and she has this yearning to have blue eyes. And so the book is all these different things of people trying to make sense of black people coming up in the early 1900s, trying to make sense of being black in a white-dominated world. And it's really, it's very, it's so poetic and beautiful. It's the way Toni Morrison always writes. But it's full of history. And I learned so much from it. I learned about, I learned about what it's like for black people in America reading this book. And Toni Morrison is, kind of the master of writing that. The only other writer that I've read that taught me that much was Ta-Nehisi Coates. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but that book, We're 8 Years in Power, really got me good too. This is just a beautiful book. If you just like to read, this is a absolute joy of greatness of an artist, an unparalleled writer at her peak. And for me, all of her books are at her peak. She's phenomenal. This is a phenomenal book. It's, and her books this is not easy reading. It's not, it's very deep, it's intense, it's scary. It delves into the depths of human beings and cruelty and the yearning to make sense of it and to find a place in the world. It's a beautiful book. Once again, if I didn't highly recommend it, I wouldn't be talking about it. And the last book I read, it was cool because a friend of mine told me he was reading it, and then I saw it on the shelf and I picked it up to read it, and it made me once again is another classic, and I'd never read it, and it's beautiful, and it's Edith Wharton's The Age of Innocence. And this is an incredible book, kind of like the way that The Great Gatsby was set among mostly very well-to-do people. This book is set in New York in the 1800s, amongst very well-to-do people, and it's a story about unfilled love and people dealing with all these restrictions on them in the culture and the society that they live in. and how can they be free and how can they love when the rules are so specific about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in this really kind of small, insular little world of rich people in New York at this time. And it's Edith Wharton is unbelievable. She's such an incredible writer. I was blown away by this book. I couldn't wait to pick it up. I was floating away in a dream, feeling every room, smelling every smell, being in love with every character. Well, and love isn't the word, but understanding every character. She describes them so well. And once again, kind of like every book that I've talked about today, there's this deep yearning to love, and there's this guy who loves this woman. He's married to someone else, but his heart is with this other woman, and he's like, what is that? Is it because he needs to escape? Does he need to get away? Or is it real love? And it makes us look at ourselves to understand and to hope to understand what is love. It's a beautiful book. Edith Wharton's a fucking genius. Dunsky, hit the doorbell.